Hey, you ready to break down Monday Night Football?
You bet.
No need to slog through all those articles. We got you covered.
That's right. We'll pull out all the important stuff.
Exactly.
So you can impress everyone at work tomorrow.
Tonight we're looking at...
well, 2 games tonight.
Yeah, Bears, Vikings, and Falcons, Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, especially if you're a Vikings fan expecting another blowout, you might be in for a surprise.
That's right. We saw a Vikings victory, 30-12 over the Bears. But comfortable? Not really.
Not really.
Yeah.
It felt like the Bears' defense actually did a decent job making life difficult for Minnesota.
They did. You know, the Bears held on to the ball longer than the Vikings did.
Really?
That's time of possession for those keeping score at home.
But they lost by 18 points.
Yep.
How is that even possible if they're holding on to the ball more?
Third downs. That's how. The Bears only converted 1 out of 11.
Whoa.
They were moving the ball, but couldn't sustain drives to get points on the board.
Oh, so that's just not how the Vikings usually play. They're typically this offensive powerhouse.
Right. And this was more of a sputtering engine situation.
Yeah.
A win, but definitely not the statement we're used to seeing.
And what about Caleb Williams? Still running for his life back there? Are you seeing improvement, or is it just more of the same?
There are those flashes of brilliance we've come to expect. Yeah. The raw talent is undeniable, but he needs support. That offensive line is like Swiss cheese.
Oh, for sure. And that can't be easy for any quarterback, let alone someone who's still developing.
No, it can't. And the coaching, let's just say it needs some work.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that touchdown that got wiped off the board because an eligible lineman didn't report?
Oh, yeah, that was rough.
Classic coaching blunder. If the Bears want Williams to reach his potential, they have some tough choices to make this offseason.
So we've got a less than dominant Vikings win and a struggling Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
Are Vikings fans really starting to sweat yet?
There are some warning signs, that's for sure. Injuries always have the potential to derail the season. We've seen it countless times.
Oh, yeah.
And the Vikings didn't come out unscathed.
You're talking about Brian O'Neill, the right tackle, going down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, the right tackle is crucial for protecting the quarterback's blind side.
Okay.
Losing O'Neill, especially for any significant amount of time, could expose Cousins to some serious pressure, especially from those elite edge rushers.
And we also saw Sam Darnold come in at quarterback. Did he look ready to lead this team if needed?
Not really. There were a couple throws that made me cringe.
Oh.
And he looked hesitant in the pocket. You could tell he didn't have that same command of the offense that Cousins does.
And even Justin Jefferson, Mr. Reliable himself, had an uncharacteristic drop.
I know.
A potential touchdown, no less.
Exactly. So, yeah, Vikings fans have a right to be a little concerned. They're still a force. But they need to address these issues if they want to make a real run at the championship.
All right, let's head to the desert, shall we? Falcons, Raiders. And spoiler alert, this wasn't the offensive fireworks show some people might have been expecting.
It was more like a slow burn.
Yeah.
And then the fire just kind of fizzled out. But hey, it gave us another chapter in the ongoing saga of Kirk Cousins.
Kirk Cousins.
Oh, yeah.
You know, his struggles this season have been making headlines for weeks. What happened this time? Was it another meltdown?
Well, he did finally end his touchdown drought.
Oh!
Which I'm sure was a relief. But let's be honest, his overall performance was still pretty concerning.
Give us the numbers.
He threw for a measly 112 yards, had another interception in that danger zone over the middle, and just looked uncomfortable all night.
I read that he didn't attempt a single pass on first down the entire first half.
Yeah.
Is that right?
First time in his career, actually.
Oh.
This is a sign of extreme conservatism.
Yeah.
You know, usually teams want to establish a balanced attack early on.
Right.
Not throwing on first down suggests they didn't trust Cousins or the passing game.
Not exactly the confidence boost a struggling quarterback needs.
Right. And it's concerning because after the game, he said, it's not where I want to be.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing he said 2 months ago.
So the Falcons' offense is still stuck in neutral, and Cousins seems to be at the heart of the problem.
Yeah.
But at least Bijan Robinson had a night, right? He was running like he was possessed.
He was the one bright spot for the Falcons, no doubt.
Yeah.
Robinson racked up 125 yards on 22 carries, his season high.
He was breaking tackles left and right, gaining way more yards than expected. He was a one-man show.
He was. And Tyler Allgeier made a decent contribution, too.
Yeah.
But even with that dynamic running game, the Falcons just couldn't consistently finish drives.
Yeah.
Too many field goals, not enough touchdowns.
I feel for Falcons fans.
Ready too?
They've invested so much in Cousins, and it's tough to see him struggle like this. What's the solution here?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
They have the talent, but they need to find a way to be more explosive and consistent on offense and fast. Do they make a change at quarterback? Shake up the coaching staff? I don't know.
Yeah.
But they need to do something. But let's not forget about the team on the other side of the field.
You mean the Raiders?
The very same. These are your 2024 Raiders.
Ooh, that sounds ominous.
It is. I mean, losing both Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell to injury, that was a recipe for offensive struggles.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
How did Desmond Ridder look filling in?
Well, the yardage was decent.
Okay.
But he also threw a terrible interception, and when they needed him to make a play, he just couldn't deliver. You know, there was this point where they needed to drive 80 yards in under 2 minutes to win the game.
Uh-huh. What happened?
They got a delay of game penalty. It was like they had completely forgotten how to play football.
Ouch.
It gets worse. Down the stretch, even when they needed big plays, Ridder was stuck doing those little check down passes to the running backs.
Not exactly a winning strategy.
Not even close. So, yeah, the Raiders are in a tough spot. Maybe even tougher than the Falcons, who at least got a win out of this.
They desperately needed that win, didn't they?
After a 4-game losing streak, 2 of them blowouts, yeah, this was a must-win.
I'm just saying. Maybe facing the Raiders in Las Vegas wasn't the worst thing for their confidence.
Let's be honest, the Raiders haven't won a single home game this season, so yeah, the Falcons caught a break there.
But you have to give their defense and special teams credit. 2 blocked punts and a blocked extra point. Those were huge.
Absolutely crucial. The Falcons are still technically in the playoff hunt, but they got a brutal schedule coming up. Commanders, Giants, Panthers. It's going to be a real test.
So even though they won, are the Falcons really any closer to figuring things out?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
They won ugly, but can they find a way to be consistently competitive against those tougher opponents?
Time will tell. Speaking of tough opponents, I want to circle back to that Vikings game for a second. You mentioned some warning signs for them, Rod.
I did. And that Brian O'Neill injury, that has the potential to be a real problem for them.
He's their starting right tackle, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And a good one. He's a key part of that offensive line. And their backups aren't nearly as strong.
Right.
You lose your right tackle, and suddenly your quarterback's blind side is vulnerable.
That could be a real issue for Cousins, especially against teams with a strong pass rush.
Exactly. And then there's the Sam Darnold situation.
He filled in for a bit when Cousins had to leave the game, right?
Yeah. Look, it's tough coming off the bench cold in a close game.
Sure.
But the reality is, for a team with Super Bowl aspirations, they need their backup quarterback to be able to step in and keep things moving.
And Darnold didn't really inspire confidence.
He didn't. A few bad throws, seemed unsure of himself in the pocket. It just wasn't a convincing performance.
So are we saying the Vikings are in trouble?
Not necessarily, but they do have some work to do if they want to be considered a true contender. They need to find a way to overcome these challenges and stay healthy. It's a long season, and anything can happen.
That's what makes it so exciting.
Exactly. But let's shift gears for a moment. We talked about the Falcons' offensive struggles, but we can't overlook Bijan Robinson's performance. The guy was a beast.
He was unreal. Every time the Falcons needed a big play, it felt like they just gave him the ball and let him go to work.
That's pretty much what happened. He carried that offense on his back, 125 yards rushing. And he wasn't just racking up empty yards either. He was breaking tackles, making defenders miss, consistently moving the chains.
He's gaining way more yards than expected. I saw a stat that said he was averaging like 5.7 yards per carry.
Yep, and he was gaining an extra 43 yards on top of what was expected. That's what they call yards after contact, a real measure of a running back's power and elusiveness.
He was the engine that kept him going.
Absolutely, and his performance really highlighted the contrast between the Falcons' running game and their passing game. It's like they have two completely different identities on offense.
On the one hand, you have this dynamic, explosive running game with Robinson, and then on the other hand, you have this hesitant, conservative passing game led by a struggling Kirk Cousins.
It's a strange situation, for sure.
And speaking of strange situations, let's talk about the Raiders. They're in a tough spot, to say the least, with both of their starting quarterbacks out with injuries.
You know, it was tough watching them trying to move the ball with Desmond Ridder at quarterback. Bless his heart, he just didn't have the experience or the playmaking ability to make things happen.
They need a miracle to turn things around at this point.
Let's just say they have their work cut out for them.
It almost feels like you need two completely different game plans depending on if the Falcons are running or passing the ball.
It's like they're trying to fit square pegs into round holes.
And then you got Kirk Cousins, who just doesn't seem to be fitting in anywhere right now.
It's been a tough season for him. You know, we talked about those interceptions over the middle.
Right.
And it's not just bad luck. This seems to be a pattern with quarterbacks who rely heavily on play action.
Play action.
Yeah. Those plays where the quarterback pretends to hand the ball off to the running back, then looks downfield for a receiver.
Right.
Cousins has built his career on that.
Okay.
But defenses are getting smarter.
Yeah.
They're not biting as easily.
Right.
And guys like Cousins are left scrambling.
So he's got defenses figuring him out, and he hasn't adapted.
Right.
What's the solution?
Well, that's what the Falcons have to figure out.
Yeah.
Can they adjust their system to protect Cousins and give him easier reads?
Yes.
Or does he need to evolve his game? These are the questions keeping Falcons fans up at night, that's for sure.
Meanwhile, the Raiders are just trying to stay afloat at this point.
It's like watching a ship slowly sinking, with a bunch of guys bailing water with teacups.
Is there any hope for them?
It's hard to see it. Maybe if they get incredibly lucky and some of their injured players come back sooner than expected. But honestly, their biggest priority right now should be figuring out what they need to do in the offseason to avoid being in this position again next year.
So the Raiders are looking toward the future, and the Falcons, well, they're still in the playoff hunt, but facing a gauntlet of tough opponents.
They are, and their success might hinge on whether they can lean on Bijan Robinson like they did Monday night.
He was a one-man wrecking crew out there.
He was. That performance was a reminder of what a dominant running game can do for a team,
Right.
even when the passing game is sputtering.
Yeah.
It takes pressure off the quarterback, controls the clock, wears down the defense.
Right.
It's old school football, but it can still be incredibly effective.
So will the Vikings be able to overcome their weaknesses and make a deep playoff run? Or will these cracks in their armor prove fatal?
That's the big question, isn't it?
And as for the Falcons, can they ride Bijan Robinson's coattails to the postseason? Or will Kirk Cousins' struggles ultimately sink their hopes?
We'll have to wait and see. But one thing is for sure,
Yeah.
the NFL is full of surprises.
Yeah.
And we can't wait to see what unfolds over these next few weeks.
And we'll be right here with you every step of the way, breaking it all down and giving you those key insights so you can sound like the smartest person in the room.
Don't forget, folks, it's not just about winning or losing.
Right.
It's about understanding the game. And that's what we're all about here on The Deep Dive.
So until next time, keep those helmets shiny and your minds sharp. We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.